The last major event to challenge the relationship between Taliban and bin Laden prior to 9/11 was the announcement on October 15, 1999, UN Resolution 1267, which called for sanctions against the Taliban regime unless they expel Osama bin Laden from their territory. Taliban were given 1 month to respond. To the outside world, the Taliban took an uncompromising stance. The regime spokesman refused to expel bin Laden on religious and cultural grounds, as they had done in the past. Thus, Taliban spokesman went before national TV and gave a short talk on the bin Laden problem.
Bin Laden existed in Afghanistan exactly 17 years before our government existed. We inherited him. And the fact is that such people were instigated by the CIA and by the government of America in that time to go and fight the Soviets. And such people were called the heroes of independence. And all of a sudden, they have changed now to terrorists. We don't say that we are defending terrorism, but we need to know whether they are really terrorists or not. We were called the puppets of America until 1998. So we don't know as to what to do now. We have been given no counter proposals. And now the perception in Afghanistan is that maybe the United States is always looking for a boogeyman.
However, internally, the issue was not taken lightly. In late October, early November, a group of ulema in the Taliban's fatwa department sent a note to Mullah Omar stating that they agreed to surrender bin Laden to the Chinese or the Iranian embassy. Text of this note is not available in full. However, the ulema must have been aware of the potential harm that UN-imposed sanctions would cause the Islamic Emirate. Hence, they may have concluded that the Taliban's leadership insistence on protecting bin Laden was no longer justifiable from a religious point of view, because it would most certainly cause harm to the Muslims in Afghanistan. Higher-ranking ulema, including the Taliban's Grand Mufti, Sheikh Abd al-Ali Deobandi, and the head of the Islamic Emirate Special Court, Sheikh Ahmadi, did not agree to the fatwa department's recommendations. They decided to involve the Union of Afghan Ulema, hereafter referred to as the Ulema Union, an independent committee of Afghan scholars who were based in Quetta, Pakistan at the time. On November 8th, 1999, Taliban Sheikh Ahmadi met with the Ulema Union and asked them to investigate the problems that are currently facing Afghanistan. And the next day, the Taliban's Grand Mufti, Sheikh Abd al-Ali, attended a meeting with the Ulema Union. He invited them to Kandahar to discuss the issue with the Taliban's fatwa department to make a joint resolution that could be presented to Mullah Muhammad Omar. On November 11, 1999, the Ulema Union of Afghanistan issued a statement addressed to Mullah Omar. Quote, "We think that if Osama was surrendered, America would also demand that we remove the veil of the women, do away with the hudud, qisas, and other punishments, and put an end to the divine laws. This situation will be a pretext for the Americans to create an infidel government. The Afghan people and the world's Muslims and religious students will turn away from the Afghan government and not support them at all. There will be a rift between them. They will look upon the religious students and scholars of this movement as agents of America. Therefore, I say with certainty that this act, surrendering Osama bin Laden, is not permitted, legally or politically. This act must not be carried out because it would be like declaring war on God." End quote. Mullah Omar's answer to the letter was issued on the same day. He assured the Union of his view that if bin Laden is surrendered, the banner of infidelity will be raised, and if he is not surrendered, the banner of Islam will be raised. Like previous and later sentiments, Mullah Omar reiterated his belief that the issue is not about bin Laden, but rather a battle between Islam and unbelief. It is unknown to what extent the Ulema Union had any sway over the Taliban's political decisions. As noted earlier, the union was not a formal part of the Taliban regime, but an independent body located in Quetta, Pakistan. However, the Ulema Union's involvement in the case indicates that there was an internal conflict within the Taliban regime that required consultation from a neutral third party. Taliban's Grand Mufti may have decided to involve the Ulema Union because he knew they would support his and Mullah Omar's own views. But it is also possible that the Taliban preferred to contact that Ulema Union rather than convening a national Leba Shura in order to draw less media attention to the dispute. In any case, this illustrates that the Taliban regime was divided on how to respond to the sanctions regime imposed by the United Nations on October 15, 1999. As before, the Taliban chose the least controversial way out of the dilemma. The events described so far in this chapter suggest that the Taliban's repeated discussions to protect bin Laden in Afghanistan were influenced by a complex set of reasons. The aim of this book is not to explain the Taliban regime's political decision-making processes. However, their policies toward bin Laden in the 1990s and early 2000s are so vital to the history of Al-Qaeda that they can hardly go uncommented. There are two common explanations for why the Taliban hosted bin Laden in Afghanistan in spite of the harm it caused the regime. The first is that the Taliban were dependent on bin Laden's military and material contributions to the Taliban war against Ahmad Shah Massoud. Second, that bin Laden was protected in Afghanistan by a group of fundamentalists within the Taliban, including Mullah Omar, who ruled the country through a peculiar mix of Pashtun honor codes and literal interpretations of Islamic law. First argument is easiest to repudiate. The Taliban welcomed bin Laden's efforts of military and material assistance in 1997 and later, but these contributions were not vital to the Taliban's survival. As I will argue in Chapter 7, bin Laden's fighters did a commendable job on the Taliban's front lines, but their contributions were still dwarfed by those of Afghan commanders such as Gulbuddin Haqqani, and even by other foreign fighter groups such as the Uzbeks and Pakistanis. Over time, Al-Qaeda's military operations became more qualitatively important, the prime example being the assassination of Ahmad Shah Massoud on September 9, 2001. However, Al-Qaeda only started carrying out strategically important operations for the Taliban in mid-2001. The major Taliban decision to expel or not expel bin Laden came in September 1998, involving the Grand Shura in Kabul, and in October 1999, involving Taliban's Fatwa Department and the neutral Afghan Ulema Union in Quetta. Second argument is to explain why the Taliban hosted bin Laden, that the decision was taken by a small group of fundamentalists who ruled the country according to their own whims, is weakened by the narrative presented in this chapter. As argued, the bin Laden issue was a source of great controversy within the Taliban, and the Taliban's leaders did not take the issue lightly. In 1998 and 1999, Mullah Omar repeatedly sought the opinions of scholars outside Taliban's inner circle to get advice on how to deal with bin Laden. The regime was, in fact, facing an impossible dilemma. Expelling bin Laden would be highly controversial and possibly lead to splits within the movement and loss of religious legitimacy. Mullah Omar himself said it candidly in 1998, "If I expel or surrender bin Laden, it will be my end." But if the Taliban did not surrender bin Laden, the Taliban would face international pressure and sanctions, and in the worst case, military attack. Taliban, in the end, chose the lesser of the two evils. They publicly continued to offer bin Laden sanctuary while implementing various measures to minimize the damage he caused. This would buy the Taliban time while searching for a more permanent solution to their dilemma. The Taliban were not a monolithic organization and were therefore divided on what this permanent solution should be and how urgently it should be pursued. Overall, officials within the Taliban were mainly pursuing two options. Either bin Laden had to be judged in a Sharia court acceptable to both the United States and the Taliban. This line was pursued by Taliban's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mullah Mutaqwali, in various meetings with U.S. diplomats. Alternatively, bin Laden had to be convinced to leave Afghanistan of his own free will, but it was imperative to the Taliban that his exit be framed as voluntary. According to one account, Mullah Omar at one point asked bin Laden outright to leave Afghanistan. Other accounts suggest that Taliban officials hoped that their restrictions on bin Laden's communications, enforced from 1999, would eventually persuade bin Laden to leave Afghanistan on his own. Bin Laden did not leave Afghanistan. Instead, he exploited the Taliban's internal weaknesses and turned the whole situation to his and al-Qaeda's advantage. Instead of propagating al-Qaeda's cause through the internal media, bin Laden built an active recruitment network in the Gulf and started using the Taliban status as Islamic State to draw recruits to Afghanistan. Bin Laden's public pledge of allegiance to Mullah Omar in the spring of 2001 must be viewed in this context.